Hi, my name is James or Flaaphy, and if you're new around here, this video is part of a series called Does It Hold Up?, where we discuss older gaming titles and whether or not I believe they're worth your time in today's gaming market. A little over a year ago, I had the pleasure of sharing my perspective on the first Bioshock game over a decade after its release as an unbiased and new player, and I'm here to do that again today with its sequel, Bioshock 2. If you need a quick refresher on the story, this time we play as a big daddy who is bonded to a little sister named Eleanor Lamb. Her mother Sophia is the main antagonist of this game. Her goal is to create the perfect human by implanting the collective memories, experience, and knowledge of multiple people into one person. She believes that by creating this perfect person, the perfect society would follow in their footsteps, and she wants her daughter Eleanor to be this utopian. We are not gonna let that happen, so in the opening cutscene, Sophia Lamb forces us to take our own life. Fast forward 10 years and we are mysteriously revived at one of the Vita chambers. Our goal is to save Eleanor, and regardless of the choices that we make throughout the game, we manage to do exactly that. I have a lot to say about this game, so let's start with the positives. Much like the first game, the sound design in Bioshock 2 is incredible. Everything from the music to the voice acting is well thought out and executed amazingly. Sinclair and Eleanor are fan favorites of the series, and it's for good reason. The combat system has been significantly improved, bordering a point where nearly every problem I had with it in the first game was fixed for this entry. Being able to use your plasmids and your weapons at the same time, especially considering this amplifies your damage, was such a breath of fresh air. Planning out big fights with turrets and traps felt rewarding, and so did jumping in blind and brute forcing it. And that's exactly what I want from a shooter game. New and returning plasmids, as well as a library of tonics, added so much more depth to these systems. It can't be understated how well the combat was executed. Next, the moral dilemmas offered to you in this game are done very well. Not only do you have the returning choice of either harvesting or rescuing the little sisters, but you also have the choice of sparing or killing 3 side characters. Grace Holloway is the only character that I let live, and in my opinion is the only character that you should let live. She is overtly hostile towards you and views you as nothing but a mindless killing machine, but other than that, she really doesn't do anything wrong. In fact, she actually takes care of Eleanor while Sophia is in prison, which we'll touch on in a little bit. Stanley Poole, on the other hand, is a weasel. He even kind of looks like one. I actually can't discuss his character in detail without mentioning one of the flaws of this game. So for now, just know that he is partly responsible for turning Eleanor into a little sister and is just a scumbag overall. Gilbert Alexander is a very interesting case. He was once a very smart man who was directly involved in the creation of the Big Daddies as well as the Vita chambers. He went mentally insane and became a literal monster. While playing through his section of the game, you hear old audio recordings of him begging you to kill him, as the creature that you see in front of you is effectively no longer him. But the creature, with his consciousness, begs you to spare him. I don't really think there's an objectively correct answer here. It sort of just depends on where your moral compass guides you. Similar to the first game, your choices also directly affect the outcome of the story, however, not as much as you might think. Your choice to save side characters only impacts whether or not Eleanor chooses to let Sophia live, and even that is largely dependent on what you chose to do with the little sisters. If you rescued all of the little sisters, then you only need to save one side character in order for Eleanor to save Sophia's life. The only way that Eleanor will kill Sophia in this ending is if you chose to kill all 3 side characters. After that, it gets a little more complicated, but ignoring whether or not Sophia dies, there are effectively 3 endings to this game. If you save all of the little sisters, regardless of what else you chose to do with the side characters, you get the good ending. Eleanor harvests your atom, leaving your consciousness and good choices to always be with her. She saves the remaining sisters. They give her the plush Eleanor presented to you in the beginning of the game, and Eleanor lets it go into the sea. If you harvest even just one little sister, you get the choice ending. You can either choose to sacrifice or save yourself. If you sacrifice yourself, you stop Eleanor from harvesting your atom. She drags you to the edge of the platform and sits with you until you die. If you instead choose to save yourself, she takes your atom, becomes evil, and implies that she is going to take over the world. If you harvested all of the little sisters, you are forced into that ending, but the music is more dramatic and darker. That's gonna wrap up our list of positives for now. If you happen to glance at the timestamps, you might notice that I have a lot of criticism for this game. Starting off small, one of my biggest issues with the first game is that the melee weapon, the wrench, was too overpowered in comparison to the other weapons. My exact quote was, "I'd rather smack everyone with the wrench because my revolver hits like a wet napkin." And the drill is exactly the same way. To their credit, it is managed better in this game, but the imbalance is still very much there. Luckily for them, and this is a positive, the drill also happens to be the most fun melee weapon that I've ever used in a game, period. Once again, I just think the other weapons could have shined a little bit more, especially considering that you can run out of ammo in this game. If I have a gun that can run out of ammo, and that's like a reality, then that gun should feel great to use. Because otherwise, why wouldn't I just hit people with the melee weapon all the time if the melee weapon is just better or the same? One of my other nitpicks with this game is the way that you gather Atom with the little sisters. It's repetitive and boring. Having to defend them from waves of enemies gets stale really quickly, especially during the last 3 areas where you have to do this 6 times per level. It wasn't necessary. Before someone says it in the comments, it doesn't matter that this is technically optional. It's still a poorly designed and boring system that the game heavily encourages you to use. Therefore, it is bad. You probably saw this coming from a mile away, but while on the topic of the little sisters, it is kind of a letdown that the ending of the game is ultimately decided on what you choose to do with them again. Part of the charm in the first Bioshock is that you didn't know that your choices were going to change the end of the story. But this time, I was expecting it from the second that it gave me the option to either save or harvest the little sisters. I was anticipating that the ending would weigh heavily on my choices with the side characters, and it just doesn't. Once again, the only thing that changes is whether Sophia lives or dies into the credits screen. And that brings us to my strongest point of criticism. In order to exist after the events of Bioshock, Bioshock 2 had to push itself into a pre-existing story without changing anything. This is how they did it. Sophia Lamb was invited by Andrew Ryan to live in Rapture, presumably pretty early on. Over time, people started taking a liking to Lamb, which worried Andrew Ryan because her beliefs directly clashed with his vision of Rapture. He believed she was attempting to start a political movement to overthrow him in her private retreat of Dionysus Park. He needed a spy and eventually found one in Stanley Poole. Stanley eventually gathered enough evidence on Sophia's cult to have her arrested. Following her arrest, Ryan wanted to silence her beliefs and was largely successful in doing so. This is why we don't hear about her during the events of Bioshock. I don't think it's a great explanation. Realistically, she would be mentioned somewhere at some point in the first Bioshock, but it is a explanation. As a reward for turning in Sophia, Stanley is left in charge of Dionysus Park and abuses his newfound power to throw parties at Sophia Lamb's expense. Eleanor was left in the care of Grace Holloway, who would regularly take her to Dionysus Park for cult meetings with the remainder of Lamb's supporters. During one of these outings, Eleanor discovers what Stanley is doing. To protect himself, Stanley kidnaps Eleanor and sells her to the Little Sister orphanage, where she is then turned into a little sister who eventually bonds with us. Fast forward an ambiguous amount of time, and Sophia Lamb has started an uprising in the prison and convinced those in charge of the facility to let her go. She finds Eleanor, and then boom, there's the start of the game in 1958. For the following 2 years, she remains unmentioned during Rapture's Civil War and the events of Bioshock, rising to power after Jack leaves at the end of the first game. That's important to note because Jack leaving Rapture as opposed to taking it over means that Bioshock 2 selected the good ending of Bioshock as the objectively correct ending in a decision-based game. Despite all that explanation, the game still struggles to feel like it fits in with the identity of the first, and that's largely due to the fact that the writer and director of the first game did not work on Bioshock 2. In fact, in an interview with Eurogamer, he said, "The reason we didn't do Bioshock 2 is because of the time frame that game had, and the company understandably wanted another game in Rapture, but we felt we had said what we wanted to say about Rapture, about those kind of environments and that kind of feel. The company wanted a new game in 3 years in a setting that the creator of the franchise felt that he was done with. And that's why this game struggles to find its identity in Rapture so heavily. The design of the first game is beautiful. Nearly every location feels unique and special. Yet Bioshock 2's area design feels somewhat repetitive and bland. And to their credit, I do think that's largely due to the fact that it's based in a fragment of an area that we're already familiar with. The big twist and emotional moment of this game is that Lamb turns Sinclair into a Big Daddy and forces you to kill him in order to progress. But you know what? Even that doesn't hit as hard as it could have, because I did not trust that man for a second. And maybe that's my own fault, but I swear to you, he is written that way, and people on Reddit agree with me, so it's basically true, I think. Now, after all that yammering, I have the task of telling you whether or not this game is worth your time. Does Bioshock 2 hold up? So, obviously, there's more involved in this, but when I look at a game, I like to consider 3 things: story, gameplay, and presentation. The fact of the matter is that the gameplay in this game is so good that the other parts of this list are almost obsolete completely. So yes, it holds up. It's very fun. What makes this hard is that if you're someone who cares deeply about story and presentation, this game will be slow to grow on you. But I do promise it will grow on you. I think if this game was a standalone title and not Bioshock 2, it would be a lot easier to enjoy immediately. I'd even go as far as to say that if this game took place somewhere that wasn't Rapture, somewhere with its own visual identity, and even kept the same exact story, I think it would be better. I would give Bioshock 2 a firm 8 out of 10. It's worth your time, especially if you played the first game and enjoyed the combat. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks for watching. If you made it this far, comment your favorite fruit. I like nectarines. We're trying something new here, so if you want a fuller view of the full story of Bioshock 2, alongside some of my initial first impressions and funny moments, go check out our full edited playthrough of Bioshock 2 right here in this playlist. And if you want to watch the Does It Hold episode on the first Bioshock game, check it out here. Do be warned though, I used to recap the entire story of these games from start to finish in these videos, so this one is a little bit beefy. Once again, thank you so much, and as always, have a fantastic rest of your day.